this is gonna be a difficult review, but just like every other review before, this was bound to happen once I get my hands on it. But at the same time, this episode, or special in general, has been talked about when it comes to it being one of the worst specials involving iCarly, especially since that Pie Guy Rules' take on it back in 2015 showcases onto why he cannot stand the episode when it comes to the second half. But in all honesty, I couldn't blame myself to hate this episode as much as Pie Guy Rules did, because, in all honesty, regardless of this being somewhat of an off-putting special to be 44 minutes, when it comes to two halves being completely different from each other, it really feels like the people who have been working on this special can't be able to get this 1 hour special right by having one consistent idea, while in the future 1 hour specials they manage to improve. Keep in mind, this is the first 1 hour special. I don't qualify I Go to Japan because that is actually a film that is much longer compared to the iCarly specials, aside from iParty with Victorious. And when it comes to my take on this episode, keep in mind, it's just my opinion. And for me personally, I think that the hate that this episode gets is slightly overrated. The special begins where we get the introduction of Griffin, who stole Spencer's motorcycle. After being caught by the police, Spencer instantly forgives Griffin as they do activities together, but Carly thinks otherwise. She doesn't forgive him over the motorcycle incident, but once Spencer leaves to get some smoothies for Carly's friend, Griffin, himself, and Carly, Spencer instantly regrets on befriending a criminal. After the kiss that he witnessed, he keeps an eye on Carly to stay away from Griffin, but in the middle of the special, he instantly accepts Carly to be with Griffin. Which leads to the second half while Carly witnesses Griffin's collection of Pee-Wee babies. Usually I would probably address the elephant in the room, but I'm gonna be saving that later. The first half of this special just goes to show that they're literally trying to make this work for a 1 hour special, but at the same time, when you have a plot involving a young girl who is underage hanging out with a bad boy that is supposed to be taken seriously, even if it's meant for comedy, it's really, really difficult to see how it's executed, with the first half being about avoiding Spencer at all costs, while the second half is completely different, that it just takes away the Spencer being protective aspect. With these issues in mind, this really feels rushed in order to make the second half of the episode work in as a 44-minute special involving iCarly, and the fact that we're witnessing a new character who only appears twice this episode in I Beat to the Heat, it really makes Griffin's presence in this show really minimal, knowing full well that what he has accomplished in Hannah Montana, mainly the actor, just goes to show that the people in Nickelodeon have no idea what to do with Griffin's actor whatsoever. Because let me tell you, if once we get into the second half of the episode, you'll understand onto why I'm not really into Griffin's character or feel sympathy whatsoever. When it comes to the subplots, they're really, really weak. To the point that the first subplot involving Sam and Freddy making a deal, or in other words, Freddy signing a contract to make a website involving the disgusting videos that Sam saw, just instantly goes nowhere. Like, I would feel sympathy towards Freddy, but the fact that Sam manages to get money so simple just goes to show that that the people behind this show are trying so hard to make Freddy miserable, because in all honesty, I've seen much worse scenarios where Freddy has been punished really brutally. Even if he did all the work for Sam's website, it just honestly feels like that the only thing I've seen from this is that disgusting fetishes can sell instantly. And the fact that Sam has a fetish of ear infection, even though that it's never implied before and after, just goes to show that they're doing everything to make Sam superior over Freddy, especially at times like this. But in all honesty, I don't have an opinion of the subplot, which the same thing applies to the next subplot in the second half. Sam has a nightmare of a monster eating her soup, which leads to Spencer trying to help her out when it comes to overcoming her fear. In all honesty, I would have enjoyed this when it comes to the dynamic of Spencer and Sam, but the thing is, it really feels like that this subplot alone feels so out of place in a special like this. Like, after Spencer forgives Carly to hang out with a bad boy, we end up getting this from him. This just really feels out of place in the fact that the ending just showcases that Spencer has a fear of monsters eating his soup. I just don't understand where this is coming from. The thing is that Sam in this really feels so forced, which is really weird considering that in episodes before and after, she's mostly the main character. But in this, the fact that she's mostly intended for subplots reasons, especially two, I'm going to assume that this is literally the only way for Sam to beat up Spencer in some other capacity. And Carly isn't going to do anything about it because she's with Griffin in the meantime. But with that being said, let's talk about Griffin's obsession with Pee-Wee babies to the point that Carly just saw something so weird involving Griffin, and people are going to criticize the fact that Carly has done some weird stuff on iCarly with Sam, and this shouldn't be any different. But that's actually the biggest counterpoint when it comes to the weirdness that Griffin has and the weirdness of what Carly has. Look, I understand that people really hate Carly in this special for being selfish of the fact that a bad boy has Pee-Wee babies, and she didn't dump him by being a bad boy. She only dumped him because he has Pee-Wee babies. And while I understand the criticism of where they're coming from, you need to understand that having Pee-Wee babies or something that is adorable when it comes to stuffed animals, that is a different type of weirdness, and believe me, there are different types of weirdnesses in reality that it's difficult to accept, but it's simple enough to ignore, and I can understand that people may use that argument against Carly in this special, but in all honesty, since that she used to have Pee-Wee babies, she knows full well that the world itself isn't nice. Look, I understand that the mean-spirited nature from Dan Schneider shows have gone a little too far, but the way I see it, in the reality in this show, especially from this episode, just goes to show that whatever Carly, Sam, or Freddy experience any of the stuff that they never went through before, mainly Freddy's unpopular opinions on Fred, Sam demanding money from the internet, and the fact that this is the episode where Carly sees Pee-Wee babies from Griffin, there's no turning back. Granted, when it comes to the Sam asking for money on the internet may be debatable, but the way I see it, no one will be able to escape from what they're getting themselves into, even if it's unexpected. And as far as I'm concerned, Carly's paranoid nature in this episode just goes to show that she's just preventing the future from happening, knowing full well of what she witnessed involving Freddy's life being torn apart in I Kiss could be an indication of what she's gonna be going through, since that this special came out after I Kiss. And since that Carly used to have Pee-Wee babies at a very young age, you need to understand that the weird stuff that she does on iCarly are different compared to what Griffin does with his Pee-Wee babies. Because let me tell you, what Carly does in iCarly involving weird antics are different types of weirdness compared to the weird stuff that Griffin does when it comes to going to a Pee-Wee convention. Let me give you an example. In Hannah Montana, Miley has a teddy bear that she takes along in the first episode of season 2. Do you really think that Carly would be able to do any of that kind of stuff? Like, what Miley does in that episode is considered weird, but at the same time, Carly isn't like Miley Stewart. She just isn't. And for me personally, the fact that she has this paranoid state, I'm pretty sure that some people may relate to Carly in this scenario, because as much as I understand that you shouldn't judge people for what they have or what they look like, Carly would expect that from her fans. Not a bad boy, especially when that bad boy is her boyfriend. And to be perfectly real with you, if Carly ever showcased Pee-Wee babies on her show in the same fashion as promoting tech foots, but at the same time tech foots are mostly for promotion, I'm going to assume that people would instantly make fun of Carly completely when it comes to the fictional universe of iCarly, in the same fashion of what people have done to Freddy in I Kiss and I Meet Fred. I would be willing to understand of what Carly did by insulting Griffin at the end of the episode is really rude for her, and the fact that she's not really a good role model, but the thing is, it's really difficult to sympathize Griffin completely, because in the first half of the episode, well, he's being friends with Spencer, well, mainly in the first 10 minutes, they're trying to convince you that you should side with Spencer when it comes to his bad boy techniques come into play once he smooched his sister. It may be a generic thing of what bad boys do, but at the same time, I really felt like that the first half of this episode, by the first time you're watching it, showcases the development of Griffin. Yes, it may be generic bad boy stuff, but at the same time, it really felt like that Griffin was actually being a bad boy. But once we enter in the second half, it's not because of his hobby that made me lose interest of his character. It's the fact that he's officially becoming a tool for Carly to work with. Because let's be real with you, I understand that the criticisms that Pie Guy stated in his video is that Carly should have talked about something else instead of just being so concerned about Pee-Wee babies. Which I understand, well, the criticism is coming into play, but the thing is, if Griffin doesn't do anything much and just makes Carly do most of the work in the second half, it's difficult to feel any sympathetic towards Griffin when, in the end, he completely breaks up with Carly and Carly's just okay with it. Granted, it's one thing that he's offended for being insulted, but it's the fact that he just said, "You're making fun of my Pee-Wee babies? You don't think that Pee-Wee babies are cool?" Let me tell you, I can understand that people, especially in the bullying community, would say that, but if you hear that from a bad boy like Griffin, then it just doesn't work. It just feels so off-putting that it's difficult to go against Carly if Griffin doesn't do much other than being into Pee-Wee babies. And before you mentioned about the sexist and nonsensical message of Pee-Wee babies or any of that kind of stuff is for girls and children, I totally understand. It's just that this special is difficult to establish Griffin as a character, and when he returns in I Beat the Heat, it just really feels like that he's just normalizing what he has, and yet at the same time he isn't focusing on the fact that Carly is being mostly concerned about Pee-Wee babies and stuff. And even if Carly and Sam had made fun of him, I'm going to assume that it's just difficult to side with Griffin if he's being established as the person in the whites completely, despite the fact that he has no emotions when it comes to breaking up with Carly afterwards and then returning in I Beat the Heat only to make an appearance and never again. Because as far as I'm concerned, the fact that Griffin only has 2 appearances in the entire show, it's difficult to understand his side of things when it comes to his hobbies of Pee-Wee babies. And that is why that this episode gained the hate is slightly overrated, because if Griffin showcased his real hobby of Pee-Wee babies on iCarly, then it would probably be in the same result as I Kiss and I Meet Fred. And I'm not sure what that episode would have been like, but it'd probably be an indication that Pee-Wee babies or any of that kind just isn't the thing that iCarly needs. Because even if it may be weird, it's not the weirdness that iCarly does. Bottom line, I didn't enjoy this episode, but I don't hate it as much as other people do. If Griffin did return, I'm going to assume that they wouldn't be able to take his character seriously in the same way as they were taking Carly's character seriously when it comes to her paranoid nature. And even if it may be unfair that Carly got a free pass in this special, I don't even think that Griffin gained a free pass as well when it comes to his likability is really inexcusable, because as far as I'm concerned, the fact that his character just didn't got me invested just goes to show of how little it is when it comes to the sexist and nonsensical message that this episode is teaching us. If I'm gonna be real with you, if the revival ever tackles the message of owning something weird and it will be difficult for people to accept, it will probably be done better, but at the same time, it's probably gonna be in the same fashion of what Carly dealt with in this episode. But that's just me though. I'm giving iDate a Bad Boy a 4.5 out of 10.